This is a walkthrough video to help you as you work through the two Drawing with Shapes projects. We will go through the instructions and write code together. After you've downloaded the code for the Drawing with Shapes download lesson and opened your project in Greenfoot, you should open the text for the lesson, Getting Started with Shapes. In step 1, you'll be instructed to right-click on the class Square and choose the option New Square. If I go over to my main Greenfoot window, on the right-hand side, I'll find the class Square, right-click, New. Now I can drag and drop a square into the world. If I want to know why my square looks the way it does, if I right-click, Square again, and I choose Open Editor, I should see all of the code that defines what a square is and how it works. You haven't learned any Java yet, so you have no idea, probably, what any of this means, but that's okay. Over the next few lessons, we're going to learn. That's step 1 and step 2. We've dragged a test object over, we've looked at the code inside. In step 3, we're going to write some of our own code. It's going to ask us to double-click the Drawing Canvas class to open the editor. I'm going to open Drawing Canvas. This is what your code should look like. I have Square over in one tab, Drawing Canvas in another. And it wants me to add this code right here to declare a new square. So I'm going to click underneath this top brace here in the green. I'm going to hit Enter once and go back up a line and type private square, square 1, semicolon. Make absolutely sure that you capitalize the S in this square. After I've written that line, next it wants me to add these two lines. Square 1 equals new square, add object, square 1, 200, 300. I'm going to click below my line that says super, here inside the yellow. And I'm going to write square 1 equals new square. Press Enter to come down a line. Add object, square 1, comma, 200, 300. Then I'm going to click Compile. If I go back to my main Greenfoot window, I should see a square. You notice if I drag and drop a square over, if I hit Reset, my test squares that I drag over, they disappear. But any square I've added in code will stay, even if I click Reset. One thing to be careful of when you write your code, however I first spell square 1 has to be exactly the same. You notice I capitalize the O on square 1, have to capitalize it everywhere else I use that name. If I do all lowercase and then I compile, you'll see these red lines underneath. It's because square one no longer matches. It's not exact. Same thing if I come down here and I capitalize this. Doesn't work. Or if I mix up my A and my U and I compile, red line says I have an error. It doesn't work. If I go to the main window, you see these slashes. It tells me I'm not compiled. And if I look over here at drawing canvas, these red lines through the name means I know that's the class with an error. So I'm going to fix this. Compile to get it working again. However I spelled the name of my first square has to be exactly the same everywhere else that I use it. All right, let's move on. In step 4, we see that our square one is located at coordinates 200, 300. That's its x coordinate. That's its y coordinate. X is left and right. Y is up and down. The bigger this number is, the farther to the right my square will move. The bigger this number is, the farther down my square will move. So it asks us to change our code so that instead of the bottom left, it's in the top right. It gives us an example, 520, 50. Let's make that change. If I move my x coordinate to 500 and my y coordinate to 50, and I compile, when I go back to my main window, I see my square has now moved to the top right. Step 5 asks us if we can make square one bigger. You'll notice it added a third line to our code, square one dot change size. We're going to make our square 200 pixels. So I'm going to click right here after that semicolon and hit enter. I want to be inside these two braces. Make sure you don't accidentally go outside. Click after this semicolon and then enter to drop down a line. I want to be inside these yellow shaded area that shows me I'm in between my top and bottom brace. And I'm going to write square one dot change size 200 semicolon and hit compile. And if I go back to the main window, oh, my square is much bigger. It's actually going off the screen. It's too big. Now it's asking if I did that correctly. It wants me to make it 45 pixels wide and 45 pixels tall. Since our square is too big, let's go back to the line where we change size. And instead of 200, we're going to change it to 45. After I compile and move back to the main window, I should see that my square is now smaller. Next, we're going to change the color. Our square is blue, but we're going to change our square so it's green, just like we use square one dot change size. Now we're going to say square one dot set color. Square one dot set color. Color dot green. Compile. Once again, I want to make sure I'm in between these two braces in the yellow. If we did it right, our square should be green. Step 7 asks you, now that you've made your square green, can you make it blue? I'm going to go back and in that same line, instead of color.green, color.blue. Now it's blue again. Next, it wants us to add a second shape. Our first step was our private square, square 1. Underneath, we're going to add a square 2. So I'm going to click after the semicolon. I'm going to press the Enter key to drop down a line. And we're going to write private square, square 2. Compile. Then it says, in the same way we added square 1, add square 2. We should make square 2 smaller than square 1 and give it the color red. So we're going to use this code for square 1 as a guide for how we do square 2. I'm going to click after this semicolon, press Enter twice to drop down 2 lines. Just like I said, square 1 equals new square. Square 2 equals new square. Press Enter to drop down a line. And I'm going to add object. Square 2, comma. Let's put him in the top left. So if I want a smaller x-coordinate, I'll go farther to the left. So let's pick 120, comma, 50. Compile. Then I'm going to go down another line. And our instruction said that we want square 2 to be smaller than square 1. Square 1 is 45. So square 2 dot change size, some number smaller than 45. Let's pick 30. Enter to drop down a line. And we want it to be the color red. So on my next line I will write square 2 dot set color, color.red, and compile. If I go to the main window, I should see square 2. It's smaller and it's red. Next, I'm going to open the code editor for the class Circle. And I'm going to compare my circle code to my square code. If I scroll through and I look at square and I look at circle, they are very similar. They both have a set color. They both have a redraw. This probably is confusing to look at, but that's okay. We're just now starting to learn. One difference I notice is my square has this public void change size, but my circle has a public void set diameter. Let's see how that makes using my circle different than using my square. First, I'm going to come to the top. I'm going to write private circle, circle 1. And I'm going to come click here after my square 2. And I'm going to start with circle 1 equals new circle. Add object circle 1, 300, 200. Circle 1 dot change size 40 semicolon. And if I hit compile, I get an error. Why is that? Because unlike square that had this public void change size, circle doesn't have that as an option. There's no change size code. Instead, I have this code that lets me set the diameter. So I'm going to change size to set diameter. Compile. There's my circle. So I've added a new circle to the world. Instead of using change size, I use set diameter. After you have added your circle, add a yellow triangle in the same way. Make sure you look at the code for the triangle class first, because triangle doesn't have change size or set diameter. Let's get started and see. First, I'm going to write private triangle 1, and click enter a few times. Triangle 1 equals new triangle. Add object triangle 1. Let's say 100, 300. Triangle 1 dot. I can't use set diameter, and I can't use change size. So how do I know what my options are? I'm going to go to the main window. I'm going to right-click triangle and open the editor. And if I scroll down in this code, I should see I have a public void set width and a public void set height. So I have two options for triangle. First, let's try set width 75. Compile. I see my width is now 75. Let's make it really tall. Let's change the height too. Drop down a new line. Triangle 1 dot set height. And I know set height is an option because in my triangle code I saw this public void set height. Let's make it 150 pixels tall. Compile. And I should see my triangle has gotten taller. And if I want to change the color, triangle 1 dot set color, color dot black, compile. There it is. We've changed it black. Now you know how to add circles, squares, and triangles into your drawing canvas, how to change their sizes, and how to change their color. Good work. In our next lesson, we'll put these ideas together and figure out how to draw a house.